Morning, everybody, and it's my pleasure to be part of this webinar. I'm delighted that there are colleges in India today that really take the time and spend time to really have their students doing more than just studies. I think as human beings, we are made up of many complex, we have many complex abilities. One of them being our brain and our ability to educate ourselves and study. But I think there are many other things that we also need to do in life to become well-rounded personalities. So I'm delighted to be here talking to a group of students who do more than just studies. Title of my presentation is Celebrating an Ocean. The reason I called it Celebrating an Ocean is because that entire experience of crossing the Atlantic from Spain to South America for me was indeed a celebration of my life in some ways. And I will speak through this in a little bit as we move forward. So here's the deal, I thought I will make a quickly run through, what I'm going to be talking about for the next 30 minutes or so. I do want to talk about the experience of crossing the Atlantic. It's an ocean. In a lot of sailors actually call it a pond, but it's one of the largest oceans, and it is a very intimidating task to imagine crossing an ocean. So the experience for me, and of course I did it a few years ago. So, despite the fact that, it's been a few years, I still vividly remember many things. And I would like to share some of those things with you. So the experience is an overall experience. It's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it is spiritual. It is, of course, a financial experience because crossing an Atlantic is an expensive task. And then, of course, there are the whole technical aspects of, what a sailor does on a sailing boat. So I want to talk about all of these. And, I don't want to talk so much about the technical experience for two reasons. One is because all the other experiences were really completely mind-blowing. And I think that is really the important learning for me. And secondly, I'm a new sailor. I'm not like, a sailor who's been sailing for decades. I've been sailing for a few years. So there are many sailors who are much better than me and much better qualified to talk about the technical experience of sailing. So let me focus on many other things and maybe a little bit of technical if some of you are interested towards the end. When I decided to cross the Atlantic, the first question my mother asked me was, why do you want to do this? Why cross the Atlantic? And to me, it was pretty much the same question that was perhaps asked of Mallory when he, was asked, why did he want to climb the Everest? And many others, of course. And the answer was, because it is there. So in some sense, why cross the Atlantic? Because it was there. But I think, on a more serious note, I learned sailing about, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I got my sailor's license 3 months before I crossed the Atlantic. So I wasn't like a terribly experienced sailor when I crossed the Atlantic. I was a very fresh sailor. But when I got my sailor's license, and my, I kind of started sailing a little bit. I learned to sail at the Royal Madras Yacht Club. The sailors there are outstanding, and I completely pale in comparison to many of the sailors at RMYC. But when I started learning the initial ABCs of sailing and kind of got a little bit of confidence that, okay, fine, it does look like I have the feet of a sailor. The first thought that came into my mind was, well, I want to cross an ocean. Why cross an ocean is just because, I've done many other things like climbing, mountains and jumping off planes and, stuff like that. So, it seemed like the most normal thing to do once I learned to sail. And then, of course, there was the preparation. How does one actually attempt crossing the ocean? Now, unfortunately, we don't have those many people in India who are into sailing. It's a new sport. It's a sport that is just about taking, hold in India. There are many youngsters who are getting interested, but sailing is not a culture, in India. It's not part of our environment. It's not part of our culture. It's not the most obvious thing that we do, despite the fact that, we are surrounded by water on 3 sides. yet we are not in some sense truly a sailing nation. So it wasn't easy for me to find out who I might want to cross the Atlantic with. So my first task was choosing the team and the boat. And because it wasn't obvious whom I could sail with in India, I looked for alternatives to sail from Europe. It took me a while to find out who I would want to sail with, and my first choice was to have a woman skipper. I wanted to sail on a boat that was actually captained by a woman. And as you can imagine, there aren't that many women skippers in the world either. So, for me, finding a woman skipper was the biggest challenge. And I found a woman skipper who, was interesting and who was scheduled to, do the Atlantic crossing as part of the ARC, which is basically the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers. It happens every year in the month of November, where the crossings happen from Las Palmas in Spain, which is basically close to the Canary Islands, and across to the South of America. This is St. Lucia. So I found a skipper, I found a captain for my boat. We found the team that kind of would be part of the Atlantic crossing, and we were ready to do the crossing. Of course, I had to do other things like get myself an international certification, make sure that I had the survivorship skills and went through the training for survivorship. I got my certification for that from the Institute of Sailing in Southampton in the UK. And then, of course, the team all got together and we met on the 15th of November in Las Palmas, that is in Spain, along the coast. It was an interesting set of people. There were 4 English. There were 2 Canadians. There was one boy from Finland, and I was the only Indian on the boat. And we set off when we set off sail. And now the thing about an ocean crossing is that once you leave that land, right, the only time you will see land again is when you reach on the other side. And that feeling of really taking off from land and not knowing when you will see land again, to my mind, is a completely surreal feeling on the one hand and a very scary feeling on the other. But be that as it is, we kind of set off from Spain. There was a big celebration of sorts. There were many boats that were taking part in the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers, and we were one of those. And we set off. Now, let me spend a little bit of time talking about the boat. The boat was called Olympia's Tigress. It was a French make Beneteau 41st boat, which is basically, a boat made of fiber. And 40 feet. I mean, that's it, 12.5 meters. That was the length of the boat. It had a hull which was, I think, about 4 meters. The keel which was about 4 meters. About an 8-ton boat is what it was. And yes, and then of course we had the mainsail, we had the jib sail, and we were carrying with us 3 spinnakers. Now let me just talk a little bit about the sails without talking too much into the technical bits of it. So the mainsail is, of course, what you normally see prominently, right? It's the big triangular sail that you see on a sailing boat. The tip of the sail is basically facing towards the so it's basically like a right angle type of sailing boat, like sail, and that's the mainsail. Then you have what is called as a jib sail, which is towards the bow of the boat. It's on the front side of the boat. And then there's a third sail that one normally uses, which is called a spinnaker. Now, the spinnaker is basically like a kite. They also call it the kite. And the spinnaker really is used when the wind conditions are very favorable and the boat can really pick up crazy speeds once you put the spinnaker up. And if any of you have seen sailing boats, then you would see this huge balloon-like thing on a sailing boat. And that's really the spinnaker. It's a very, very light sail, but it is made of very strong material. And that kind of gives the boat the speed in winds that are conducive. So that was the boat, Beneteau first. The boat was called Olympia's Tigress. Very, very nice name. I really loved the name of the boat. And we set off after beating that initial fear of leaving the safety of the land. And as we were sort of leaving the land, the shores of Spain, There was a very experienced sailor that we had a conversation with the previous evening. And he told me one simple thing. He said, Kshama, the only goal for anybody who crosses the Atlantic is to leave the land from Spain and touch land on the other side. As a sailor, when you're crossing an ocean, you never ever want to get into the ocean. At all points of time, you have to absolutely stay on the boat. If you get into the ocean, you are in trouble. So the only goal of a sailor is to leave land, stay on the boat, and get on the land on the other side. And that's really what we attempted to do. The entire crossing took us about 3 weeks. We did around 3,100 nautical miles, which is, I don't know, 5,000 plus kilometers. And imagine we are 8 sailors on a 12-meter boat, like literally. I mean, there is no space for anybody on that boat. Now, the way we actually did the crossing was we worked in shifts. So there would be 4 sailors up on the deck sailing at any point of time, and the other 4 would be down inside in the cabin, either sleeping or resting or cooking or doing whatever they wanted to do, reading, listening to music, and so on and so forth. But the cabin was really, really small. It was a very, very tiny cabin. I mean, I think it was like 2 by 2 meters or maybe even smaller. I don't remember. And that's the space we were in. And the way we actually did the crossing was we took 4-hour shifts. So what it meant is that for 4 hours we were on top sailing, and then the next 4 hours we'd be down sleeping. And you can imagine what that does to your body clock, right? So for 3 weeks non-stop, you're up for 4 hours, you're sleeping for 4 hours. You're up for 4 hours, you're sleeping for 4 hours. It doesn't matter whether it is day, night, midnight, afternoon, you would be so tired sailing on the deck in the hot sun. That the minute we went down into the deck, into our rest time, most of us would just crash, sleep for 4 hours, get up and back up on the deck to sail. I basically played 2 roles on the boat. I was doing what is called as the cockpit of the boat, which is basically, the gears, managing the ropes and so on. So every time you take a sail up and down, you have to have somebody who will change the gears or release the ropes to make sure that the sails can go up and down and so on and so forth, adjust the sails as required, manage the spinnaker and make sure it's kind of rightly wound and so on and so forth. So that was my job. That was one part of the task that I did, which is basically managing the cockpit of the boat. And the other task I did was helming, which means, driving the boat. There's this huge steering kind of thing that the boat has, which really is about balancing and, getting the right wind and the direction and so on. So these were 2 of my main tasks on the boat. And of course, I did everything else. I did the cooking, I did the cleaning, a little bit of entertainment for my sailing buddies. Everybody did everything. So that was basically the life on the boat. 3 weeks, that's all we did. 4 hours up on the deck, 4 hours down in the cabin, and then doing whatever else. I want to sort of speak about few experiences that we went through. And there were hundreds of experiences and I can't talk about all of them. So I kind of decided to focus on 3 or 4 experiences that I went through during the Atlantic crossing and hope that all of you youngsters find those experiences interesting. So the first experience we went through was a mid-Atlantic distress signal that we got, and this was about, I think we were 4 or 5 days into the sailing, it was in the night. It was, I think, around 8:30 or something, 8:30 p.m. in the night, and then we got a distress signal on our radio, and it was very unclear. It seemed very muffled, but we kind of thought that there was a boat in trouble somewhere around us. Now, I do want to say that, once you leave the shores of the land on the Atlantic crossing, when you leave, there are many boats around you, right? Because there are many boats leaving at the same time to do the crossing. But literally within a few hours, as you get into the ocean is so huge that once you are in the middle of the ocean, you cannot see any boat around you. The closest boat is probably 100 nautical miles away. And that's how vast the ocean is. So we looked out into the dark to see if we could see any lights or any, signs of distress, but we could see nothing. And then very, very far in the distance, we saw a blinking light, and we thought that must be the boat which is in distress. Now think about it, we are mid-ocean, there's a distress call, we are ourselves on a race. And the question in our minds was, do we really have the time? Should we really turn back and go to help those who are in distress? And a bunch of us huddled together, and of course we were scared to turn back because we would be going against the winds to go and help this boat in distress. And we discussed, and at some point of time, I was very clear in my mind that maybe it's a false signal, maybe there is no boat in distress at all. But if we don't go there, we will not find out. And I will live the rest of my life thinking that somebody was in trouble, somebody needed help, but I didn't turn and go to help them. So it was very clear in my mind. So when it came to casting my vote, I was absolutely clear. I said, it doesn't matter if we, lose time. It doesn't matter if we lose wind. We will turn back and we will go and see whether we can help if somebody is in trouble. So we did that. We did a mid-ocean turn. Kind of turned around and traveled, at least for about a couple of hours, because the distances on the ocean are vast, till we kind of came across a French sailing boat. It was, of course, the boat was not particularly in distress. They had issues, but they were issues that they could deal with. And then, that situation was managed, and we turned back and we, headed back in the direction of our destination. I think the lesson to me here was very important. The lesson was that I had an opportunity to help somebody. When you have an opportunity to help somebody, I think it should be very clear in our minds that if we don't help somebody who is in need of help, then we are going to live the rest of our lives thinking that I could have made a difference, but I didn't choose to make that difference. And to me, it was very simple, that if I had a choice to help somebody, I would do whatever it took, even if it meant compromising on my goals, to go back and help them. So that is one incident I thought would be interesting to share with all of you youngsters, especially in the current environment, given what we are dealing with. Now what happened is, because we kind of turned and went out of the wind, when we kind of hit back onto the course that we were sort of making across the ocean, the winds have changed, and winds change all the time. So we had actually lost that really nice patch of wind because we'd spent 4 hours going off course. And when we came back, the winds were gone. Now that's a nightmare for a sailor, right? Imagine you are mid-ocean and there are no winds at all. And this is a sailing boat, right? This is not a petrol-driven boat. It's not a fuel-driven boat. If you have no winds, you don't sail, as simple as that. And so we were stuck in still waters. And that's the second lesson I learned. And I do want to share that lesson with all of you as well. So the still waters is a nightmare for a sailor, right? You are in the middle of the ocean. It is pin drop silence in some sense when the waters are still. There is nothing that moves. I mean, it is frightening. It's absolutely frightening, because you're sitting for 3 days, and it took us 3 days, to get the winds back. So for 3 days, we were sitting on the boat doing nothing, 8 of us, because now there were no shifts, right? Because everybody was awake and sleeping and doing whatever they wanted. We couldn't get out of the boat because you're not supposed to get out of the boat on an Atlantic crossing. So we were just sitting there. And more importantly, we were consuming our water and we were consuming our food, because we had only carried supplies for 28 days, And if we didn't make it across the ocean in 28 days, we would have run out of water, we would have run out of food, and we would be in deep trouble. So every day we sat there, not knowing what to do. We were just so worried that we were burning our supplies in the meanwhile. And it was it was working terribly on our minds. But I think the only thing that really kept us going is that this is wind. These are winds. This is nature. Nature changes. There will always be better times. And the winds will come back and we will sail again. And that just kept us going. And when I think about those 3 days I spent in the still waters of the Atlantic, I'm reminded of what we are going today through as humanity, where we are stuck in our homes and in our little rooms, not knowing what to do, not knowing where the future is going to be. leading us and so on and so forth. But yet we need to be inspired and we need to keep going, knowing well that life will change. You know, this is not going to last forever, and there will be better times, and we will work towards those better times. So that's the second lesson I wanted to share with you in terms of, you know, my experience of being in still waters in the middle of the Atlantic for 3 days. But yeah, into a sail and we started cutting across the ocean. Now, an ocean journey can never be boring. It's always full of things that are happening, you know. So it's raining, there are small gales, there are winds, it's happening all the time. And, you know, gales are basically this sudden shower that comes, you know, like a sudden clouds that come around, and there is like a rainfall. And then the boat is covered in, you know, or water and so on and so forth. That used to happen all the time. But there was a particular incident that we sort of went through, which was very, very scary. And that was an electric storm. Now, an electric storm basically is a storm where, you know, you have clouds that form, and then there is, of course, thunder and lightning. And sometimes the lightning tends to fall on water. And as we all know, water is a good conductor. So when the lightning falls on water, it travels like crazy into the ocean. And if you're, of course, in the path of that travel, then you're gone. You're basically charred. You're finished. So there was a lightning storm building up around us, and you know, of course, if you have seen a sailing boat, there's a mast of the sailing boat, which is this huge, tall, metallic beam that extends into the sky, and that can actually be, act like like an attraction to the lightning. It can actually cause the lightning to fall on the boat. So the first thing that we did when the whole thing, you know, sort of started building around us, we took the mast down, you know, we kind of secured the boat and so on and so forth. And we sat there in the boat, sailing by normal speeds, hoping that the electric storm would pass away. It didn't, you know, and this was in the middle of the night. And at some stage we thought, okay, fine, this is terrible. If the storm comes and hits the boat, because the boat is going to be an attractor to the storm, we need to be ready to cast away in some sense. So we got a lifeboat out, we got the provisions into the lifeboat, you know, we kept the fire extinguisher ready in case the electric storm or the lightning hit the boat and we had to, put the fire off. We got our supplies of water, food, medical, kit, all of that ready, and we were all ready to abandon the boat if the storm came close to us. And it was a very strange experience, sitting in a boat and seeing thunder and lightning crash all around the boat. Can you imagine that? You're in the middle of the ocean, there is nothing, and you can see the lightning so clearly, like it is being drawn by, a painting brush. And we saw that lightning falling all over us. Fortunately, for us, it didn't fall on the boat. And, it was morning, the thunderstorm, the electric storm passed away, we were all fine, and we were ready to celebrate another day on the ocean. Very, very frightening experience, but at the same time, the experience of having lived through something I cannot imagine too many people would go through, being in the middle of the ocean and actually watching lightning strike the water all around the boat. So that's the third lesson I wanted to sort of share with you. And there were, of course, many such things, right? I mean, and there was a disaster I almost caused on a boat, and I want to talk about it. So basically, I was handling the ropes, and this was in the middle of the night, and as I was sort of pulling a rope in to tighten the spinnaker, the rope just went off my hand. It could be partly because I was tired, partly because the boat was really sort of swaying very badly. We were like almost throughout the entire Atlantic crossing, the boat was at 45 degrees. That's how it was sailing. There was that much of wind. So whatever be the reasons, I let go of the rope and the rope just went off my hand. And it was absolute disaster, because when the rope goes off, what can tend to happen is that the spinnaker can actually coil around the mast. And once the spinnaker coils around the mast mid-ocean, you're finished. There is nothing you can do. You're stuck there basically. You can't correct that situation. Of course, a lot of my fellow sailors all cursed me and so on and so forth. But just when the rope was about to go off the boat and fall into the water, I just grabbed the rope with my hand and got the rope back and managed to correct the situation and got the spinnaker going up again. But oh my God, how I was abused by my fellow sailors. They all abused me like I've never been abused in my life for that mistake. But of course, fortunately, I could correct that mistake, so all was good. So I think these are all sort of lessons in very tough situations. But the entire crossing itself was a very, very beautiful experience, and I do want to spend some time talking about the beauty of that crossing. There were many, many beautiful moments. You know, we had dolphins, swimming alongside the boat all the time. You know, we'd get up in the morning for breakfast, take a cup of coffee, go stand on the deck, and there would be dolphins like, a meter or 2 meters away. Sometimes there were like dozens of them swimming alongside the boat, and it was just absolutely beautiful to watch them. And dolphins really love human beings. There's a way we communicate with dolphins, and they understand it. And we would stand there and we would talk to them, and they would, like, for miles and miles, like they would be swimming along with us or in the ocean. Absolutely beautiful moments. um, the other thing I want to share with you is just the entire experience of the night on a boat, and it's very beautiful. I don't know if you are aware, but there are parts of the Atlantic Ocean that has algae in it, which is basically floating algae. It's very, very small. It's microscopic algae. You cannot see it in the water, but it is there, and it is fluorescent in nature. So when the boat sort of cuts through that algae, and the light of the boat, and there's this very small light on the boat, the light of the boat falls on the algae, you just see the algae firing up. It's like firecrackers. It lights up green and blue and white, and it's absolutely amazing. It's like this great treat that nature is giving you as you sail across the ocean. So I spent lots and lots of my nights, so when I had my 4-hour break, I wouldn't go down and sleep in the cabin. I would go and sleep on the bow, which is the front tip of the boat. So I would go there, I would put my sleeping bag there, I would strap myself to the rails, and I would go to sleep on the bow. And from there, I could see this absolutely amazing, delightful experience of fluorescent algae putting up a show for me. It was just delightful. And then, of course, the full moon. Can you imagine? You go to a beachside and you see the full moon. It's so beautiful. Imagine a full moon in the middle of the ocean. And the moon was, I remember this one particular night where the moon just cast its shadow on the water. And that shadow from where it was cast till the boat just came like a zigzag silver snake towards the boat. It was just the most delightful sight. And, every day would be like that. The sunrise and the sunsets, the colors of the sky, the colors the waters would take, the sound of the waves. It was just absolutely, it was just a complete treat for the mind. Very, very beautiful. And then, of course, the entire crossing in itself, despite the trauma, despite the storms and the fears and the concerns, and all of that, was in fact an experience of tranquility, because it just cannot be any other way, because you are the only set of human beings in that ocean for miles and miles and miles on end. And that experience of being mid-Atlantic is absolutely unexplainable. You cannot describe it. It's just beyond description, because you left land, the closest land to you is probably 2000 nautical miles away behind you, and then your destination is probably another 1000 nautical miles ahead of you. And that feeling of saying that I am absolutely in the middle of nowhere is just it's just amazing. It's something one can't describe. And then of course the whole tranquility angle of it, to say that I have nothing to do. This is all I need to do for the next few weeks till I reach land on the other side. So it all in all, I think it was a brilliant experience. It took us, like I said, 3 weeks to cross the Atlantic. On the day 19, we knew that we were close to land, and of course, we had all our devices, compass, and everything else that was required to give us a sense of direction. But broadly, we knew that, okay, fine, another couple of days we will see land. But you never know exactly when you will see land, right? Because the winds and so on and so forth. And I remember that moment when I actually spotted land after 3 days. It was like a really small speck on the horizon, like very, very far away, like the mountains of St. Lucia. And I was like, oh my God, that is land. And then we were like crazy, we were jumping, we were shouting, throwing water around, and it was just absolutely the most delightful moment of my life, knowing very well that finally, after all this, I had sighted land. And of course, after sighting land, it took us 24 hours to reach the land. And then that's it. And I had decided for myself that once I touch land, the first thing I will do is get off the boat and kiss the land, kiss earth, kiss Mother Earth for being there. and that's what I did. And of course, we went across on the other side. This was St. Lucia. There were people with drums, and there was a lot of music. There was media. There were flash bulbs. And it was brilliant. We were the successful guys. We had made it across the ocean in one piece, and during that season, there were 8 boats on that crossing that got demasted. And of course, there were a few deaths as well. And, I and my teammates were the fortunate ones who actually did that crossing without getting ourselves into deep trouble. So, yes, so that was my story. I'm happy to take questions, but if we can flip through some of the pictures, you will see what I was referring to. So if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so that's the spinnaker. And it's a very, very big sail. As you can see, it's a very colorful sail. It's very, very thin material. This is the spinnaker when we were folding it to actually put it onto the sailing boat before we set off for the sail. But when you're on the boat, you don't have the luxury of so much space to fold a sail, because you're taking the sails up and down all the time as the wind changes. So, we actually mastered the art of pulling down the spinnaker in less than 30 seconds and folding it and neatly keeping it folded for the next use in the boat. So that's the spinnaker, and those are a couple of my fellow sailors helping to fold the spinnaker. Yeah, can we go to the next picture? That's the starting point. As you can see, many, many tiny little boats waiting to set off from Spain for the Atlantic crossing. And this is the only time I saw all of these sailing boats. The next time I saw a sailing boat was when I reached the other side of in South America. Across the entire ocean crossing, except for the boat that we saw when we went to to the rescue, we did not see any other boat on the Atlantic crossing. That's how big the ocean is. Yeah, the next picture, please. Yes, that's me. So when we actually set off on the sail, it was very cold. This is November in Europe, so you can imagine it was winters there, and it was so super cold. So for almost a week after we set off sail, we had to dress like that. We had to wear layers and make sure that we were completely, well protected from the wind and from the cold. But I think a week into the Atlantic Ocean, the temperatures got better. And by the time we landed in St. Lucia, it was summer, and it was nice and beautiful and warm and glorious. Yeah, the next picture, please. I don't know whether you can see that very clearly, but that is me at the helm, and that's the huge wheel that we use for sailing the boat. The picture doesn't quite show it, but there were times during the entire crossing when we had 15-meter tall waves. So can you imagine taking a small 12-meter long boat and climbing onto a wave which is 15 meters long? It's just absolutely mind blowing. When you kind of ride those really, really tall waves. Yeah, the next one. Yes, that's a sunrise on one of those beautiful days, and every day was a different sunrise. The colors were different, the hues were different. Sometimes there were clouds, sometimes there were no clouds, sometimes the sky just turned completely orange and absolutely beautiful. The next one, please. Yes, that's another orange sky. The next one. So it's the same ocean. But every sunset and every sunrise was different, and you have to actually be there to experience the difference. It was never the same. The next one. Yeah, another one of those with a lot of clouds, of course. The next one. Yeah, one more of those patchy clouds, beautiful sun. I remember this sunrise was the one where we had a whole bunch of dolphins that came alongside us. Now there are these dolphins that are called fake whales. You know, I don't know whether you heard of it. False whales is what they are called. They are huge sized dolphins, and the way and the way we kind of noticed that there were dolphins is when one of them came and hit our hull in a very hard way. You know, like hard to say, came and like really hit the hull hard. And then we looked out and we found these huge dolphins swimming alongside the boat, like really, really huge dolphins. They look like whales actually. Yeah, but very, very interesting creatures. Yeah, next one. Yeah, that's me, you know. I mean, if you guys remember, I spoke about spending many, many hours, you know, sleeping on the bow. So this is what I would do. When it was not my duty, I would take my sleeping bag, if it was night or day, whichever way, put it there, make sure I was well strapped and I was like, you know, completely protected so that if the boat tilted, I wasn't thrown out in the ocean. But spend hours and hours just simply being there on the bow of the boat, you know, listening to the sound, experiencing the lights, just living life in the moment at that point of time. Very, very spiritual experience. Next one. This is an interesting story. So, you know, we were on the boat and then suddenly I saw this white bird flying around the boat. And I'm like, it's the middle of the ocean. Where did this bird come from? And you know, you know, that's my colleague. He's a sailor from Finland. And we were making fun of the bird and saying, you know, this guy's got lost in the middle of nowhere, and what can we do to help him, and so on and so forth. So this was, by the way, this was, you know, the night before the storm, and the bird circled the boat for almost like half an hour, and at the end of the circling came and sat on my shoulders. So as you can see, I'm actually managing the spinnaker, which is like a really difficult task. And I have a bird sitting on my shoulder in the middle of the ocean. It was really, really strange. And then he sat on the boat, you know, he hung around us for a while and then just flew off. We have no idea where he went or where she went. But I kept telling my sailors that he was a good omen, you know, he came to protect us before the storm. Yeah, the next one. That's the team. That's all of us on the other side after we made it across the ocean. Very successful, very tired, very suntanned, as you can imagine. Being an Indian, I was fortunate enough not to get tanned so badly, but you can see all of my sailors, you know, my co-sailors along the boat with red noses and red faces and so on and so forth. They were all very, very badly sunburned. I was very glad to be Indian and to be brown. And yes, and the next one, that's my last slide. Yeah, so there you go. I think that really, really in the world is nothing more satisfying than a job done well. And I think that's the feeling I had at the end of the Atlantic crossing. I was no great sailor. I'm still not a great sailor. But the experience of having done that really makes me feel that I've lived my life.
If the boat sinks or having some problems to go in the middle of the ocean and there is no option to escape means what will you do, ma'am?
That's a very good question. The summer time, mid-ocean, because the water in the Atlantic is very cold, right? It's like it's zero. It's sub-zero actually, not even zero. It's sub-zero. So the survival time is less than I think less than a minute. If you don't pull the sailor up, you get you know you get hypothermia, and that can cause death. So I think, like, you know, like I mentioned to you, I think the only thing that you do as a sailor on the Atlantic crossing is make sure that you never have to get into the water, because if you get into the water, it's very difficult to survive. And of course, there have been miraculous, you know, sort of, I'd say, situations where sailors have survived, you know, in disasters, but those are far and few in between. Some of you must know or must have heard of Abhilash Tommy, the, you know, the commander from the Indian Navy who was attempting the global, the circumnavigation, the Golden Globe, and he met with an accident, and he survived. But he didn't fall in the ocean. He managed to stay on his boat. If you fall in the ocean, it's very difficult to survive. So that's tough. That's a chance you take. Now, theoretically, there are always possibilities that you fall in the ocean and somebody rescues you. But I think that's that's really not very likely to happen. So yeah, it's a risk. That's why you don't take that chance. And of course, everything is done right. So when we are on the boat, we are always hooked. There is a hook that is tied to each sailor that connects us to the railing of the boat, so that if we fall overboard, we don't go away from the boat. Because what happens is that at peak speeds, the boat could be sailing at 50 nautical miles an hour, and that's crazy speed. Within minutes you lose sight of the person who fell in the water, and there's no way to turn around and go and pick up that person. Even if the person survives hypothermia, you probably will not even be able to identify somebody who goes on board, in mid ocean. So all precautions to be taken, each man for himself. You have to be very, very careful. You have to be absolutely clear about your balance, because the boat shakes all the time. Almost 90% of the time, the boat is sailing at a 45-degree angle. So you're not walking straight on land, you're walking at a 45-degree angle for 3 weeks non-stop. But I mean, it comes out of experience. So yeah, I guess you have to be careful, you have to be lucky, and you have to be saying your prayers all the time.
Yes, ma'am. And the question, how did your family members allowed your
Okay, so my family was not happy about it, but my family has not been happy about many things I do. They tolerate me. They are very, very nice. They're very supportive in their own ways. Uh, and you know what? It's like that. I've taken many, many risks in my life, but I do risky things with great caution. So they have been great supporters, but they worry a lot about me.
Yes, always family is the only support normally. Yes, and we have one more question. And how you crossed it, and there is any unseen ocean animals there when you were crossing it?
And also we had a lot of fish that we saw, and some really, really interesting fish. So one day we had this storm of, I don't know how many of you have seen a swordfish. I think in some places it's also called the ladyfish. It's quite a tasty fish. I'm a Goan, as you can imagine. So I know a lot about fish. And we had a storm of swordfish. So we got on the deck, and suddenly there was this fish flying all over. And then before we knew it, the whole boat was covered by swordfish. There were like thousands of swordfish on the boat. They just came flying into the boat, like they were flying all over. So then we had to really clean the boat and send them off, and so on. They are quite smelly and sticky. So yeah, so we've seen stuff like that, and we've seen lots of. We saw a huge turtle in the middle of the ocean, and of course lots of dolphins. Like I said, we saw the false whales, the large dolphins, many types of fish. We saw jellyfish as well, and they're beautiful. Some of these jellyfish, they are fluorescent, and when you see them around the boat, they are like these little parachutes all around in the water that are glowing in the middle of the night. It's absolutely stunning. Yeah, but I didn't see any unknown mythical creature.
Okay, ma'am. Then we have one person, Madhumita. Ma'am, did you get seasickness during the journey?
Not at all. Absolutely not. So, I think we lost signals, I think within a few hours of leaving Spain. And it was really strange. I hadn't put in my leave, my vacation mailer on my official mail, because I was so busy in the last few days before sailing, and I thought that that is the last thing I will do before I get on the boat. And in the last minute I forgot. So literally, like within like an hour or two, we had lost, we had lost cover. And then I had to call a colleague of mine, because I had like very faint sound signal, and I had to call a colleague of mine and tell her to put on my vacation mailer on my official mailbox, so people knew that I was on leave and not reachable. But absolutely nothing. So about a couple of hours after leaving, maybe an hour after leaving Spain, and maybe an hour before getting into South America. For the entire period, absolutely no cover. We had a satellite phone, of course, and the satellite phone also was not on all the time. There were times when we had good cover, there were times when we didn't have good cover. But yeah, that's bliss. I mean, I think it's a little too much of noise that we have, going on with all our social media and the need to be connected 24/7. I was completely disconnected from the world for 3 weeks, and nothing happened. The world went on without me. Nothing stopped.
Okay, ma'am, one more question, ma'am, from an attendee. Do you think age or gender shouldn't be a barrier for such adventures? Because
Absolutely
once we
not.
start, and maybe we will get old. So to do such an adventure, you think it's a barrier? Gender is a barrier.
No, I mean,
Age is
look,
a barrier.
it's like that. Like I told you, I made a choice to pick a boat that was captained by a woman sailor. That was a choice I made because 99% of the sailors are men. And can you imagine if I say I'm a sailor, if you don't know that I am a woman, if you say I'm a sailor, people will assume if you're a sailor, you're a man, right? That's how much of a bias we have. That a sailor is a man, a pilot is a man, a biker is a man. It's not true. I mean, I don't think that there's any difference. I don't say one is better than the other. I think we were made equal. We are physically different, but I think in all other ways we were made equal. So I don't see any reason why a woman can't do anything equally well as a man can, and the other way around. I've seen men doing so many things that women do so well, and I think it works both ways. And age is absolutely not a barrier. I mean, I learned sailing at the age of 48. You know, I learned skydiving at the age of 35. I learned mountaineering at the age of 28. I learned scuba diving at the age of 50. I got my scuba diver's license 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I don't think age stops us from doing anything. It's all in the mind. I think keeping physically fit is extremely important. And you don't learn to be physically fit when you grow old. Your physical fitness is a way of life. You have to be worried about your physical fitness every single day of your life. It doesn't come suddenly.
I mean, in general, for our students, a phrase goes, it takes courage to succeed. How do you connect this phrase, ma'am? It takes courage to succeed. Could you just wind up the session with these two things? How do you
Yeah, I think it takes courage to succeed, and I think it takes perseverance to succeed as well. And because you can be courageous in sports, and that can help. But I think what's important is to be courageous on an ongoing basis, because things never work the first time. Life is full of ups and downs. Life is full of failures. And in some sense, people like to talk about successes, right? So look, the last 1 hour I've been talking about a successful crossing of the Atlantic Ocean. I can spend days and days talking about things I tried in my life, but things that failed. So we always end up talking more about our successes than our failures, but it is many, many failures and many, many instances of not giving up that eventually result in a success. So I think that's just the way life is, and we just need to keep at it. So I completely agree with you. Perseverance, courage is really what is required.
I think in the middle of the sea, you saw that on a couple of white birds, struggling the boat for about half an hour before the storm, and
Yeah.
the Finland sailor also is just marking at it. Do you consider that as a signal the animals normally get into that before any danger is facing ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it was just one bird. It was this one white bird, and I don't even know. I've Googled a lot. I don't know what that bird is called. I tried to find out. I asked a few of my sailing colleagues and people who are into, bird watching and understand them better. But I still don't know what that bird was. And it was very strange, right? He must have flown, I don't know, 2,000 nautical miles to reach to that boat, and probably flew back another 2,000 nautical miles to go to wherever the bird had come from. I definitely thought the bird was a good omen. I definitely thought the bird was made the difference in terms of our survival. And I was so delighted that the bird came and perched on my shoulder. I mean, who does that in the middle of the Atlantic? What an experience! But I don't know. Maybe the bird was the good omen. At least that's the way I take it.
Yeah, of course. Because the animal normally the sense of just diagnosing any probably is a natural eventuality in advance.
Do sailors believe in superstition?
I think everybody does. Sometimes the whole notion of sailors believing in superstition is higher than normal people. But that partly also comes because they are on their own in the middle of the ocean, with nobody around them. Fighting the vagaries of the weather and so on and so forth, and nature. And I guess it does things to your mind. I mean, it can be very, very difficult on the mind, just being in the water like that, looking around and seeing nothing but water for days and days and days. Do they believe in superstition? I don't know. I mean, none of the sailors on my sailing boat were superstitious.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, the way in which you carried, we felt that as though we were sailing along with you till that land at the other side of the steamboat. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. My pleasure. And before I end, good luck to all the youngsters who are on this call, and focus on their studies and also focus on non-studies. I think both are equally important.